Hello, thank you for having me. I would like to talk about how education is changing, right? We've all seen these extraordinary things that are happening in AI, but it's not already here, right? We have this existing educational system, and we're going to have a transition between that system and whatever comes in the future. And we need to know how to deal with that right now, because that's when people are being educated, that's when these AI tools are springing up. So, I'd like to talk a little bit about how to educate a planet in flux. The reason I feel I should have a perspective on this, so co-founded Masterclass, I'm founder and CEO of Outlier.org, where we teach college classes. But I also had an industrial robotics company early in my career, and we got to see what automation through robots did to industries. Had a beverages company, I'm an artist myself. So basically I'm a student, but also I teach, but I'm also an employer. So I have to think about the skills, to Josh's point, that make for an excellent person in my company. So here's the thing about traditional education. Put a person on the moon. That's amazing. AI forgot to put gloves on this spacesuit, right? So this is a cool image, but don't trust a spacesuit made by AI just yet, soon. So how do we figure out how to take this model of traditional education and add in AI, transition, and figure out the answers to the two main questions in education? One, what do we learn? Right, this is one of the hardest questions ever, because what do we learn begs the question, why are we learning? Right? Is it for status? Is it a job? Is it for innovation? Well, the problem is that question itself begs the question, the fundamental question of why are we here? What is the meaning of life? Right? So when you sit down to write a curriculum and you sort of stare into the void, having an existential crisis, this is what professors have to do. This is what universities have to do. And we're betting people's future on what we learn. It's scary. This is a hard question, but it's harder today than it's ever been. Because the second question of how do we learn it is changing. For a long time, we had books, the original MOOCs, right? Talk about distributed education, books were amazing. And we knew what you needed to learn. Knowledge didn't change particularly quickly. They worked great. But as the delay between when you need the information and when you can get the information has been reduced, there's this coincidence between what we learn and how we learn it. In fact, it begs the question, what even is learning? What do you need to store inside your head? So, I'll make this a little more concrete. For a long time, we've relied on a hybrid mind. So Plato actually has Socrates criticize writing in Phaedrus. He says, writing, it's a crutch. You won't remember anything. It's not dynamic. It can't respond to you. It doesn't have knowledge of the soul, which we might call theory of mind. This is something that AI is actually good at, which is pretty interesting. But writing itself was considered part of a hybrid mind. You're delegating some of your learning to some other entity. Calculators, Daphne brought that up this morning, Wikipedia, tape recorders. If anybody did journalistic interviews before tape recorders, the journalists would write down your quotes. And when they were published, you sounded great because their mind would interpret it and write down what you meant. Well, now that there are recorders, I get quotes printed exactly the way I speak, and it's not ideal for me. Cars. So a lot of people don't know, but when you push on the brake in a car, there's actually a mind between you and the wheels. So anti-lock braking systems will stop you from skidding the tires. So if you push really hard on the brake, you'll feel this like bouncing feeling. This is a hybrid mind, right? You're giving the intent to the brakes, I want to stop, and then it decides exactly how to do that for you. It's a little bit scary. If you have an electric car or a hybrid car, that brake pedal, all it really is an Xbox controller, right? It's just sensing, okay, how hard does this person want to stop? I'll go from regenerative to hydraulic. Now, some of them have hydraulic backup systems. It's all going by wire. So, we're actually going to do an interesting visualization because inside your own mind, there is a hybrid mind reliance. So neuroscientist David Eagleman has a really interesting theory that your cognitive mind has access to information that it can't see. It can use information, it can use skills that it actually doesn't know is there. So we're going to do a visualization experiment. So I want everybody to close their eyes and pretend you have a steering wheel in a car. Your hands are on a steering wheel. So go ahead and get those arms up there. Let's all feel silly. We can't see each other. We have our eyes closed anyways. Now, pretend you're driving down the center of a 3-lane highway. All I want you to do is change lanes from the center lane into the right lane. So I just want to watch everyone's motion as they do it. Okay, I see a lot of people using blinkers. That's very curious. Okay, so go ahead and open your eyes. Did you do something that was like, you're holding your steering wheel, you check your blind spot, maybe you turn on your blinker, you change lanes, and you're in the lane? Okay, so everybody in your car is dead, unfortunately, because that's not how cars work. Your cognitive mind, you all can drive, you all made it here, right? The way a car actually works is you change lanes, then you turn the wheel an equal and opposite amount in the other direction to straighten out the car, then back to center. So a lane change literally goes like this, and then like this. I had friends not believe this. David Eagleman runs into the same thing, and they took videos of themselves driving. I'm like, first of all, don't take videos of yourselves while driving. But secondly, this shows that you know how to drive. You rely on this tool that you don't have cognitive access to, and you put your life in its hands. I've actually never seen anyone get it right, including myself. The only one I've seen is in a YouTube video, an F1 driver remembering the Monaco track. You could tell that it was perfect dynamics. Okay, so the question is, what do we need to know then? In this world where we have generative AI, where we have this sort of mental augmentation, cognitive amplifier loop, how much knowledge is useful? Right? Is it useful for you to know how a whole hydraulic braking system works? Or is it useful for you to know that if you push on the middle pedal, your car slows down until eventually it stops? Right? So the way I think about this is it's this barbell-shaped curve, where if you could think of this as expertise, very low expertise on the left, PhD on the right. On the left side, you've got an incredible, useful amount of knowledge, because that's the sort of push on the brake pedal, car stops. Then it's not particularly useful to know a lot more. You can think about this with AI, right? You make a prompt, it gives you an output, it's probably pretty good, right? But if you have a PhD in the output, you're gonna know when it's wrong. You can use that PhD, you can use that in-depth knowledge, like in the braking system of a car, to further knowledge itself. So this is the theory of how we need to think about knowledge in a world of hybrid minds. I also included these at the bottom because this is me trying to get Midjourney to make that graph, right? So, and this is where I needed to go from this left side here, which was, Midjourney, please just make a graph with 2 bumps on it. And it gave me all these. 2, I just use a graphing calculator. I know how to use the equation for it. So, where we are in the world is we're all directors of these teams of AIs now. This has come up a number of times. And it really does feel like being a director, right? When I'm on set and I'm trying to get the lighting to be beautiful on somebody, the director of photography knows lighting. But I might say, okay, could you, I don't know, separate them from the background more? And then they use their intelligence, all of their ability to make that happen. So all I'm doing, what does that sound like? It sounds like a Midjourney prompt, right? Separate them off the background more, right? It's asking a hybrid mind. We use hybrid minds already amongst ourselves. So for example, classification. If you wanted to know what a song was years ago, you'd have to go to like a musicologist and try to explain the song to them. And they would say, oh, okay, that's 70s rock, meets Led Zeppelin, this sort of thing. Now we have apps like Shazam that just listens to it, and it's like having an expert musicologist in your pocket. So now everyone here has an access to a team of some of the world's best experts in classification. For example, when I go on walks, I'll take photos of plants, and it tells me what type of plant it is. That's amazing. Literally before PlantNet came out, I had a text message group with my sisters called What's That? And I would just send them a photo, and they loved it, right? Because they're both sort of naturalists, and they would write back, oh, that's, Queen Anne's lace, this sort of thing. Or, don't eat that, that's poisonous. But the question is, we're all in this room right now, we have this access to the extraordinary team of expert classifiers, but do we use it? Because you have to have a reason to use something. You have to have that motivation, because the future of education is the future of motivation. To Stephen's point about liberal arts version 2.0, this is where I think this comes in a very important way. So this is the first image I sent to ChatGPT. Because I was like, oh, can it tell what type of jet this is with all this condensation on it? No problem. That's an F-22 Raptor. But then I'm looking at this jet, and it reminded me of when I was 13. I noticed these spots in the tail of jets in videos. And I just thought they were beautiful, right? My motivation was, what are these beautiful things? Why are we seeing these periodic moments of fire in a plume? That's not something I'd ever seen in a campfire or in a blowtorch. It took me 5 years to track down what those are. Because how else would I encounter this knowledge? I'd have to track down an expert. I bump around reading books about jets. Never found out what those were until finally I was able to Google it on the internet when I was 18 and find out they're shock diamonds. Great name. It turns out it's a supersonic exhaust, and you get this standing wave in it. Beauty is absolutely a fine motivator, right? That was where my curiosity was. And look at this. ChatGPT, instead of taking 5 years, it was my second question, and it knew those are in fact shock diamonds. This is extraordinary. This is a new world. So the question is, what do we hold in our head, and what do we put in the AI? And this is a question that we all have to answer as educators and as students. And we don't have to be right entirely, right? We can give it a shot, update. Because here's the problem. If we don't have something to guide that, we won't know how to use AI. We won't have the motivation to ask it the correct questions. So this is, I had a Greek philosopher using ChatGPT and Midjourney, and he's asking it, how do I make size that never get dull? Because I want to be able to harvest wheat. Keep in mind, he has access to all of our modern knowledge, but because he doesn't have a model of the world like ours, the best thing he can think of is to ask for how to keep a knife sharp. It's probably a really good question. There's a lot of sharpening of size when you're cutting wheat. Now, he could be asking it, how do you make an industrial robotic harvester that gets all the wheat for you? But he doesn't know to. I think this is where liberal arts comes in. Now, what I've tried to do is apply caching theory from computer science to information itself. Because when you ask yourself what skills you need, what knowledge you need, in caching, you ask how urgently do you need it, right? So it's like if I need the name of the things in the plume of fire in the back of a jet, and it's in a book somewhere, well, I can't get that very urgently. If one of my friends knows the answer, I can get it fairly urgently. If it's in my own head, it's relatively instantaneous. So when you look at the knowledge that you're trying to learn as a student or teach as an educator, how urgently does the person need it is a very important one, because their urgency just got so much easier. You no longer have to Google and sort through the results. You can just ask ChatGPT. The second is frequency. How frequently do you need this, right? Changing a tire on a car. That's probably not something you do particularly frequently. You can actually store that outside your head at this point. You know you can just go to YouTube and look up how to change a car tire. You're going to figure it out. That's something that, in the olden days, we used to have to keep in our heads because our cars would break down, and there was no way to learn how to do that in that location. Also, our cars broke down much more frequently, so there's a higher frequency there. But finally, and this is not from caching theory, this is my own spin on it, you need to keep world models in your head. And by a world model, I mean simulating the way the world works, whether it's the way people interact, whether it's the way physics works. These are the concepts that allow you to ask the AI, to delegate to a team of synthetic intelligences to make new innovations. So I tried just splitting it up, right? Because as Josh pointed out, anything you try to do today in a year is going to be completely outdated. I tried to think of, okay, what do we keep in our heads and what's just-in-time knowledge? What do you reach out to get? And as you can tell, there's not a bright line differentiation here because sometimes you need to have procedural knowledge that's just in time. You don't need it, right? Changing a tire. Other times, a know what, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble not knowing what something is, like a poisonous snake. So as educators, I will recommend that you go through your classes, you look at your learning objectives, and you rank each one. Do I keep this as is? Let's say it's era of the calculators, you can do a square root by hand. I don't think anybody does that anymore, right? So you can do it in an augmented way. You can depend on the student having a hybrid mind augmentation to do the square root for them. Well, there's a third one, which is maybe this is just an optional curiosity. One of my fellow speakers mentioned an abacus. Do you need to know how to use an abacus? No. Do we even need to have an augmented version of using an abacus? Because we do. We can look it up on YouTube and we can figure it out, right? There's just a lower urgency to it. I would say that gets filed under optional curiosity. I think it's good to know how an abacus works. There's a world model there, but we need to make space for this new knowledge. And this is the way we can transition from our traditional educational model right now and put real thought into what do our students need to hold in their head and outside their head. You still need to be able to use the skill. Okay, so I loved hearing the president talk about the focus on projects in this university, because project-based is a way to motivate your students. That never gets old. You always want motivated students. You want them to think about the way they think, because the best way to tell what skill you need in your head and what you need outside it is to understand your own feelings about it and your own ability to use that skill. So it's metacognition, thinking about thinking. But finally, existing methods of teaching are excellent. They work, right? So for example, film. John Huston, who directed the Maltese Falcon, said film is the closest to thought process of any art. I don't know if that's 100% true, but you can feel the truth in it. There's a reason we go home and watch Netflix or watch TV and not some other art form, is it's very easy to imbibe video. But AI is going to enhance everything, including these existing methods. So this is John Keg, and he's teaching Philosophy 101 on Outlier. So John Keg taught the whole class in English. And we used a piece of software called HeyGen, and he speaks Korean with the mouth lip-synced. So this is a traditional teaching method, but enhanced using AI. It's not just ChatGPT, it's not just Midjourney. And trust me, it's extraordinary, just to visualize that. But in this time, people will always need guidance. And the scarcest and most valuable thing in education is and will be one-on-one time with the human teacher. Because even if the teacher isn't giving you the know-how or the procedural knowledge, there is something to the motivation that another human being gives that is very, very hard to replicate. And even when we have excellent replication over text in AI, it won't be the same as I took computer science with a group of 4 friends. It was fantastic. We had a great time doing that. It's that human connection that's very difficult to replicate. The second thing is that humans are really good at figuring out vastly nonlinear situations. So the guidance of a human being through a time of change like this is important. However, it's going to be very expensive because everything else has gotten so much less expensive. So overall, I'm extremely optimistic. There are absolutely problems with relying on a hybrid mind. But one of the things I love about the state of AI right now is it runs on incredibly low-cost machines. And by that, I mean it runs in the cloud. So you can use an Android phone from 10 years ago, and you can talk to ChatGPT. You could probably use the Apple IIe that I grew up with and just talk to it over text. That's amazing. The level of democratization of access to knowledge and to education is something extraordinary that we've never seen before. However, the caution and the need for liberal arts V2 and a broad understanding of world models is we need to think about the inputs, we need to think about the outputs, and we need to guide it well. Happy to take questions. So, how school education should be changed given that we have all these experts practically in all areas? Great question. This is where I think we should use caching theory, which frequently when I say something or when I hear something, I think of it as a trailhead, right? So I don't have time to explain what caching theory is in its entirety right now, but now you know the name of it. So you can go to ChatGPT and say, what is this guy talking about with caching theory? What's frequency and urgency in relation? So the way we should change our education is literally we should run through the entire curriculums, and we should look at whether you should be performing a skill with the augmentation of a hybrid mind with AI, whether you should have it in your skull, probably in the cognitive system. I think about the lower neural subsystems as well, like the driving example. You have to load some of that stuff in, otherwise you trip over stuff too frequently. And we should go through and we should make those edits, and we should do that every single semester. And we'll watch as the curriculums change, and we'll watch as these students become more and more powerful in their ability to innovate and flourish.
Okay, and next question, please.
If we have access to the necessary knowledge at any time, it seems that education systems based on knowledge will face significant challenges. Is there a possibility that schools could disappear? Great question. Everything's possible, but the probability is sometimes very low. I think that's one of those situations. Human beings love to gather to innovate. There will always be the bleeding edge of knowledge. So while you might have access to all of this knowledge, think about that Greek philosopher asking how to keep size sharp. Now, if that same philosopher came to this university and started to talk to people, he would say, what are these robots that I'm hearing about? Maybe we should have a robot that sharpens size, or a robot that cuts wheat for us. So no, I don't think schools will disappear. We like that as a species. And I think there's an extraordinary value in communicating with people who are coming up in the same era as you as well. Because as the world changes so quickly, you will need colleagues to navigate it with and to generate the next chapter of knowledge for humanity.
Okay, and please answer the third question on your screen.
Okay. When the moment comes that AI surpasses the average human capabilities, even in aspects we have considered human-like, is there still a need for humans to maintain a human-centered approach when dealing with AI? As I've gotten older, I've realized that there are a lot of needs and there are a lot of wants in life, right? So even if we may not need to do something, we still may want it. Right? The human experience is a very special and beautiful thing. When we think about what somebody does as a hobby, for example, Yo-Yo Ma is an extraordinary cellist. I will never play cello as well as Yo-Yo Ma. He exists, but I still like to play the cello. So there's no need for me to do that, but I want to. There's intrinsic value to it. And maybe that playing of cello informs other parts of my life. Maybe that playing of cello is simply enjoyable. So no, I think there will always be a human-centered approach to AI, even if there's an AI-centered approach. We'll always have a diversity of approaches, and the second we don't, we're in trouble.
Okay, let's wind up this Q&A session. Thank you so much. 여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Thank you.
고맙습니다.